Jimmy Kimmel thought he could roast anyone on his late-night show and get away with it. Politicians, celebrities, even the president. He'd done it for years, tossing sharp jabs and crude humor at the powerful, always emerging unscathed with a laugh track to back him up. On that fateful Tuesday night, he turned his sights on Judge Amy Coney Barrett, a U.S. Supreme Court justice known for her conservative rulings and unyielding grip on the law. Jimmy sat behind his desk on the brightly lit set of Jimmy Kimmel Live, his audience buzzing with anticipation as he launched into his monologue. "Folks, let's talk about Judge Amy Coney Barrett," Jimmy began, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This woman makes decisions like she's auditioning for the role of most biased judge in history. I mean, come on, her rulings are so far right. They make Trump look like he's been volunteering at a soup kitchen. And let's not even get started on her whole 'I'm a fair judge' shtick." "Yeah, right, Amy. And I'm the next Supreme Court justice." The audience roared with laughter, clapping wildly as Jimmy grinned, feeding off their energy. He leaned forward, his tone growing more biting. "Seriously, though, her latest ruling on that abortion case? It's like she took a time machine back to the 1800s and said, 'You know what? Women don't need rights.' What's next, Amy? You gonna ban electricity because it's too progressive? You're a walking, talking contradiction. And a pretty stiff one at that, if you know what I mean." The crowd erupted again, some even whistling as Jimmy chuckled, clearly pleased with himself. He wrapped up the segment with a final jab. "Judge Barrett, if you're watching, and I know you're not, because you're probably busy rewriting the Constitution, lighten up. Maybe take a break from being the Grinch of the Supreme Court and laugh a little." The show cut to commercial, and Jimmy leaned back in his chair, sipping water as his producers praised the segment. He felt untouchable, as he always did after a good roast. Little did he know that his words had already sparked a firestorm online. Clips of the monologue spread across social media, racking up millions of views overnight. Some laughed, but others, particularly Barrett's supporters, called the roast disrespectful and defamatory. By morning, the backlash reached a fever pitch, and one person in particular took notice: Judge Amy Coney Barrett herself. The next day, Jimmy lounged in his Los Angeles home, sprawled on his couch in sweatpants, scrolling through his phone. He chuckled at some of the memes his roast had inspired, completely unaware of the storm heading his way. The doorbell rang, and he shuffled to the door, expecting a delivery. Instead, a stern-looking court officer stood there holding an envelope. Jimmy frowned, taking the envelope and tearing it open as the officer walked away. Inside was a court notice, stamped with the seal of the U.S. District Court. His eyes widened as he skimmed the document. Judge Amy Coney Barrett had filed a defamation lawsuit against him, claiming his remarks on the show had damaged her reputation and undermined her judicial integrity. Attached to the notice was a transcript of his roast, with the most offensive lines highlighted in bold. "Most biased judge in history. Walking, talking contradiction. Grinch of the Supreme Court." The notice demanded his appearance in court the following day. Jimmy's jaw dropped and he let out a nervous laugh. "This has to be a joke," he muttered to himself, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. He called his lawyer, Mark Thompson, a seasoned attorney who'd handled celebrity legal dramas before. Mark's voice crackled through the phone, calm but firm. "Jimmy, this is serious. Barrett's not playing around. She's got a case. Your comments were personal, not just political. We need to prepare for court tomorrow." Jimmy scoffed, still not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. "Come on, Mark, it's comedy. I roast people all the time. Trump, Biden, Kanye. I've said worse. She's just mad because I called her out. This'll blow over." Mark sighed. "Judges aren't like politicians, Jimmy. They don't take kindly to attacks on their impartiality. Barrett's known for her sharp legal mind. You need to take this seriously." Jimmy hung up, still convinced he'd walk away from this with a slap on the wrist at most. He spent the rest of the day joking about the lawsuit with his team, even drafting a few quips for the next show. "Guess the judge can't handle a little heat," he texted his producer, laughing as he hit send. The following morning, Jimmy arrived at the courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, dressed in a sharp suit but with his usual carefree demeanor intact. A swarm of reporters waited outside, microphones and cameras trained on him as he stepped out of his car. His lawyer, Mark, walked beside him, whispering last-minute advice, but Jimmy barely listened. He spotted a reporter from TMZ and flashed a grin. "Hey, Jimmy, what do you think about Judge Barrett suing you?" the reporter shouted, shoving a mic in his face. Jimmy chuckled, adjusting his tie. "I think she needs to loosen up. I mean, come on, it's a comedy show, not a Supreme Court ruling. If she's this upset about a few jokes, maybe she's not cut out for the bench." The reporters laughed, scribbling down his words as Mark shot him a warning look. "Jimmy, stop talking," Mark hissed, pulling him toward the courthouse doors. Jimmy just shrugged, waving to the cameras as they entered. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with energy. The gallery was packed with spectators, legal analysts, curious citizens, even a few of Jimmy's celebrity friends who'd shown up for the drama. Jimmy took his seat at the defense table, still smirking as he whispered to Mark, "This is gonna be a breeze. She'll yell a little, I'll apologize, and we'll be done." Mark shook his head, his expression grim. "Don't underestimate her, Jimmy. She's not here to play games." The bailiff's voice rang out, silencing the room. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Amy Coney Barrett." The door to the judge's chambers opened, and Barrett stepped out, her black robe billowing slightly as she took her seat at the bench. Her face was a mask of professionalism, her eyes sharp and focused as she surveyed the courtroom. Jimmy felt a flicker of unease for the first time, but he quickly pushed it aside, leaning back in his chair with a casual air. Barrett adjusted her glasses and spoke, her voice steady and commanding. "This is a civil case, Barrett v. Kimmel, regarding allegations of defamation and reputational harm. Mr. Kimmel, you are accused of making false and damaging statements about my character and judicial impartiality during your broadcast on Tuesday night. I have reviewed the transcript of your remarks, and we will now proceed with the hearing." Jimmy's lawyer, Mark, stood to present their defense. "Your Honor, my client's statements were made in the context of a comedic monologue on a late-night talk show. They were not intended to be taken as factual assertions but as satire, protected under the First Amendment. Mr. Kimmel's show is known for its humorous commentary on public figures, and his remarks about you were no different." Barrett nodded, her expression unreadable. "I understand the nature of Mr. Kimmel's program. However, the First Amendment does not provide a blanket shield for statements that cause harm. I will now hear from Mr. Kimmel directly. Mr. Kimmel, please stand." Jimmy stood, smoothing his jacket as he flashed a small smile. "Yes, Your Honor?" Barrett's gaze locked onto him, her tone icy. "Mr. Kimmel, during your broadcast, you referred to me as the most biased judge in history and claimed my rulings were motivated by personal ideology rather than legal principle. Do you have evidence to support these assertions?" Jimmy shifted on his feet, his confidence faltering slightly. "Well, Your Honor, it was a joke. I mean, I'm a comedian, not a lawyer. I was just poking fun, you know, like I do with everyone." Barrett's eyes narrowed. "A joke, you say? Let's examine that. You also stated that I am a walking, talking contradiction and suggested I wish to ban electricity due to my supposed opposition to progress. These statements imply a lack of competence and impartiality in my role as a Supreme Court justice. Are you aware that such claims, if false, can constitute defamation under the law?" Jimmy swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. I didn't mean it like that. It's just hyperbole, you know? For laughs." Barrett leaned forward, her voice cutting through the room. "Hyperbole does not excuse reckless falsehoods, Mr. Kimmel. The law recognizes that public figures, even judges, have a right to protect their reputations from baseless attacks. My role on the Supreme Court requires public trust in my impartiality. Your words, broadcast to millions, directly undermine that trust. Do you understand the gravity of that?" Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He glanced at Mark, who gave him a subtle shake of the head, signaling him to stay quiet. Barrett continued, her tone unrelenting. Furthermore, your use of derogatory language, calling me the Grinch of the Supreme Court and mocking my demeanor, crosses into personal insult, not protected commentary. You did not critique my rulings with facts or reasoned arguments. You attacked my character with no evidence, purely for entertainment. That is not satire, Mr. Kimmel. That is slander. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of Barrett's words hanging in the air. Jimmy's usual quick wit failed him, and he stood there stunned as Barrett pressed on. I have reviewed similar cases, such as New York Times versus Sullivan, which established the standard for defamation of public figures. To prove defamation, I must show that your statements were false, made with actual malice, and caused harm. Your remarks meet all three criteria. You had no factual basis for your claims, you made them knowing they could damage my reputation, and the viral spread of your segment has led to measurable harm, including threats against me and my family. Jimmy's stomach dropped as Barrett cited the legal precedent with precision. He realized, too late, that he'd underestimated her. She wasn't just a judge. She was a legal scholar who knew exactly how to dismantle his defense. Barrett leaned back in her chair, her voice softening slightly but still firm. Mr. Kimmel, I do not take this action lightly. I understand the role of comedy in society, but with that role comes responsibility. Your words have consequences, and today you will face them. Jimmy's lawyer stood again, attempting to salvage the situation. Your Honor, we acknowledge that my client's remarks may have been in poor taste, but a defamation ruling would have a chilling effect on free speech. Comedians must be allowed to critique public figures without fear of legal repercussions. Barrett nodded, considering the argument. I agree that free speech is a cornerstone of our democracy. However, the law draws a line between critique and defamation. Mr. Kimmel crossed that line. I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Kimmel, you are ordered to pay $500,000 in damages for the harm caused to my reputation. Additionally, you will issue a public apology on your show, to be aired within the next week, acknowledging the falsehood of your statements and affirming the importance of judicial impartiality. Jimmy's knees felt weak as he absorbed the ruling. $500,000 was a steep price, but the public apology stung even more. He'd built his career on never backing down, on pushing boundaries with his humor. Now he had no choice but to comply. Barrett's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone final. Let this be a lesson, Mr. Kimmel. Words have power, and those who wield them must do so with care. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and the courtroom erupted into murmurs as Barrett exited. Jimmy sank into his chair, his face pale as Mark leaned over to him. I told you not to underestimate her, Mark said quietly. Jimmy didn't respond, his mind racing with the reality of what had just happened. That night, Jimmy sat in his studio, the cameras rolling as he prepared to deliver the apology Barrett had ordered. The audience was quieter than usual, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Jimmy looked directly into the camera, his usual smirk replaced by a humbled expression. Last week, I made some comments about Judge Amy Coney Barrett on this show. I called her biased and made other remarks that were not based in fact. I was wrong to do that. Judge Barrett is a dedicated public servant, and her role on the Supreme Court demands our respect. I apologize for my words and for any harm they caused. I've learned an important lesson about the responsibility that comes with this platform, and I'll do better moving forward. The audience clapped politely, but Jimmy felt the weight of the moment. He'd always thought he could say anything and walk away laughing. Judge Amy Coney Barrett had taught him otherwise, and it was a lesson he'd never forget.